This is BYU Sports Nation, brought to you by the BYU Store, simulcast on BYU TV and BYU Radio. Now, from Studio B, here's Spencer Linton and Jarom Jordan.
BYU Sports Nation is live, your day-to-day play-by-play in Studio B, presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere. Monday, January 17th. Hope you are all enjoying your Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Wherever and however you're connected, great to have you with us. I'm Spencer Linton, teamed up with the man who is oft stopped in the airport of all places to take pictures with his adoring fans, Jarom Jordan.
Yeah, right. Charles Barkley was in LAX with the women's basketball team, and they stopped him and chatted and took a photo, and it looked like this, and it was awesome. Charles told the team he was there for a Capital One commercial. So,
With
yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson, probably?
Probably, yeah. Can't wait to see that. So, Lee Camard said he was super cool, super nice. Charles is looking good, man. Team went down, got a 40-point dub against LMU, so great trip.
He's part of the greatest sports show in the entire world.
We're part of the greatest sports show in the entire world.
I like that response from you. Inside the
It's
NBA
pretty good,
is
right?
must-see
It's
television.
very fun. Very fun.
Yeah, and he looks great. To your point, the round mound of rebound, I bet, would appreciate today's show lineup, which includes BYU basketball senior point guard Tejon Lucas. He joins us live after BYU's best win of the season. But will it remain the best win of the season, or is there a bigger victory for BYU out there somewhere? And are the men going to join BYU women's basketball in the top 25? Plus, does BYU feature the best shooter in college hoops? Who said that? And which former BYU football player delivered one of the biggest verbal hits in the Twitter sphere? Bring on today's BYU Sports Nation headlines.
Men's hoops beat San Francisco 71-69 thanks to a 10-3 run to close out the game. Alex Barcelo led the way with 18 points. Tejon Lucas had 12 points, including 6 of 6 from the line. He'll join us later. Caleb Lohner refound the offense last week, including a big bucket with under a minute left in the 10-point comeback dub.
Guards Barcelo. Barcelo takes Tape low. AB cut off on the block. Hands off to Lohner. Jump hook. Lohner! Caleb Lohner scores it. And the Cougs up 3, 68-65.
Cougars are 15-4 now, tied for second at 3-1 in the West Coast Conference standings, matching up with also 3-1 San Diego Thursday night. This game was on CBS Sports Network. It has moved to BYU TV because Gonzaga had a rescheduled game. CBS Sports Network took that, so we took the BYU San Diego game. Countdown to tip-off on BYU TV at 8:30 Eastern Thursday night. Of course, Cougar pregame live on BYU Radio at 8 Eastern. And this just in, BYU just 2 out
AP rankings.
in the AP Top 25, just 2 out. So you would think if BYU takes care of business against San Diego and Portland this week, good shot at potentially being in next week.
There were 9 teams in the top 25 that lost this week. A ton of parity in college basketball. Yeah, just win. Hope some other teams lose. And you'll be a top 25 team.
That's fun.
How about Cougars in the NFL playoffs? Daniel Sorensen had 4 tackles. Zane Anderson added a tackle. And the Kansas City Chiefs beat up on the Pittsburgh Steelers 42-21. The number 2 seed Chiefs will now host the Buffalo Bills in a divisional round playoff game because Buffalo eliminates Kyle Van Noy and the New England Patriots. Van Noy had 3 tackles in the playoff loss. In the NFC, Fred Warner had 5 tackles for the 49ers in an upset win to eliminate the Dallas Cowboys 23-17. However, Fred is questionable for the 49ers at Green Bay this weekend after suffering an ankle injury. We hope Fred gets better and is able to play against the Packers.
Gonzaga back to 1, by the way. And the NFL playoffs, there was only one good game, you know. They were all kind of boring. Ben Roethlisberger throwing outs the whole game. It's just, he couldn't even push it down.
Wasn't the Raiders-Bengals game outstanding and exciting?
That was good. That's true. On Saturday, that was good. Okay, number 18, women's hoops beat up LMU by 40. 77-37 Saturday, thanks to 31 turnovers by the Lions. 31! Shayla Gonzalez had a 5x4. 19 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 steals.
Pretty good.
Cougars 14-1, 4-0 in the WCC. Play at Pepperdine Thursday night. They are stinking good. Did I short them a win? Are they? Yeah, they're 14-1. They are so good, man.
They have beaten their last 2 conference opponents by 34 and 40, respectively.
Bad TV.
And they're not shooting the 3 well on top of that. They're not shooting well.
What if they didn't even shoot a 3?
Crushing team.
What if BYU's like, we're going to try and win without even shooting a 3?
They'd probably still win. 16th ranked BYU Gymnastics beats Nebraska in a dual meet. The Cougars score 195.750. That's up a little more than 4/10 from their season opener. Nebraska with a 193.925. Sadie Minor Van Tassel winning the all-around with an outstanding score of 39.325. She scored the highest on both vault and beam in the competition.
Track and field hosted the BYU Cougar Indoor Invitational Saturday. 11 first-place finishes. Nice. Also, Roy Linkletter broke the Canadian half marathon record yesterday in Houston with a time of 1:01:08.
Rory Linkletter.
Very nice.
Still doing work. Repping BYU. Well done. All rise and shout. It's time for What's Trending.
You're talking about it, and so are we. It's What's Trending on BYU Sports Nation.
Survival of the fittest. BYU escapes War Memorial Gymnasium on the hilltop and beats San Francisco for a monumental Quadrant 1 victory. BYU's first Quad 1 win of the season to join their 6 Quad 2 victories, which, by the way, is the most in college basketball. But because it is a Quad 1 win on the road, tough game, overcoming a 10-point deficit and some questionable officiating. Is the win at USF, Jarom, the best win BYU will have all season?
It could be. Unless BYU beats St. Mary's on the road and that win is a little better than San Francisco. Right now, those two are pretty tight in terms of net rankings and Ken Pom and whatnot. So it very well could be. And it was a huge win because, you had to – I don't know that BYU had to have it. But in terms of the BYU 0 Quad 1 wins at this stage thing, it was like, okay, at some point BYU's got to get some Quad 1 wins here. And at some point BYU might slide a little bit just because you got to have some Quad 1 wins on Selection Sunday. So this was huge. BYU's down 10 at the 12:41 mark of the second half. BYU had yet to shoot a free throw, and San Francisco had 19. I'm not one of those guys that believes that fouls and free throws should be even. The game's not even. They're not equally aggressive and fouling each other, but there should be some free throws on the board for BYU, you'd think, right? Again, they shouldn't be even. BYU, after the technical from Mark Pope, which apparently it was like the bench saying something. I don't exactly know what happened.
What did you hear?
Whoever said that on the bench, good job. Good job getting the tech.
Lit the fire.
Because that kind of changed things a little bit, right? So BYU ends up outshooting San Francisco from the free throw line only in the final 12:41. 18-9. That was a huge deal. And when you get Tijon Lucas and Alex Barcelo to the line, who combined for 9 of 10, if they're the right people shooting, that changes things. So if we think, will this be BYU's best win? By net, the only other game that could compare is in Moraga. Of course, Gonzaga and Provo compares. And maybe BYU somehow gets that one. But I'm not inclined to think so after watching BYU get boat raced in Spokane last Thursday.
Granted, in 2020, they got boat raced in Spokane and came home and won.
Yes, I trust BYU's offense in that year more than I trust BYU's offense this year. This year, BYU is about defense. 92.5 defensive efficiency right now, tied for 4th best since 97 for BYU. It's just one of the best defenses BYU's ever had.
BYU has 3 opportunities to best the win on the road at San Francisco. Even if they win at St. Mary's, I don't think St. Mary's metrics are going to be as good as San Francisco's. And plus, just the way BYU won that game, and BYU's already beaten St. Mary's at home, so I don't know. To me, it feels like San Francisco is, at worst, a top 4 win for BYU basketball season. There are 3 opportunities. Mm-hmm. One, you mentioned Gonzaga at home. Like, that obviously would supplant San Francisco on the road because Gonzaga is Gonzaga. Then there is maybe a second-round game, a first-round game technically at the West Coast Conference Tournament if BYU is the 2 seed and they are playing in a semifinal against San Francisco that would help BYU late in the season, propel their seed maybe. Yeah. Could be another Quad 1 win.
That could be St. Mary's
late in the season. Could be St. Mary's or San Francisco.
Yeah. I'm still not in on San Francisco being like better than St. Mary's per se. We're like week 3 in conference play. I'm not crowning them quite yet. You want to crown them? Then crown them.
Yeah, I just think San Francisco,
they're good.
Based on what I have seen, BYU has played against both teams. I just feel like San Francisco's a better team. Like, I feel like they have better players than St. Mary's right now. Yeah. We'll see.
But the Dons have to actually do it during conference play. Like, St. Mary's has been there and done that, like, as a program and with that head coach. San Francisco's new to this game. They're new to the, hey, we're going to be in the top 3, and we're, like, in the bracket. Like, how do they handle all this pressure? How do they handle going out on the road a little bit? The jury's still out a little bit for me. Obviously, they're good. Like, are they turning good? Like, Lunardi says they are. Okay, cool. I need to see a little bit more. To me, yeah, St. Mary's. A week ago, we saw St. Mary's play this like terrible offensive game. So St. Mary's
was that their terrible offense, or was it BYU's defense?
Yes, both. Yeah, they had a lot of open looks they just missed, right? And that BYU didn't contest at the or whatever. Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, third opportunity for BYU to best the San Francisco win obviously would be getting to the NCAA tournament and winning. Anyone, I don't care who you play. I don't care if BYU's a 5 seed, 6 seed, 7 seed, and they're supposed to win that game.
Oh, yeah.
Winning in the NCAA tournament against a team that doesn't have as good of metrics as St. Mary's or Gonzaga.
The metrics don't matter. You're in the tourney.
Winning a tournament game.
Yeah.
That would be better than even BYU beating Gonzaga at home. Just getting to the second round of the NCAA tournament. To me.
Fun discussion. Yeah.
All right. Our question of the day.
Because the season's defined by NCAA tourney for sure. But if you beat Gonzaga, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell.
See, that's the thing. Like, what matters more? What will resonate more? Is it beating Gonzaga, or is it winning an NCAA tournament game? To BYU fans, it's probably winning a tournament game. To the rest of the college basketball world,
I don't know. BYU fans value beating Gonzaga quite a bit.
Sure, but you're telling me right now a BYU fan would take beating Gonzaga over an NCAA tournament win? Come on now.
Right. Well, is it first four? Is it no? Yes, winning in the tournament matters for sure, but beating Gonzaga is always special. Always
like
special.
A tournament win to me would be the top win, regardless of what BYU does the rest of the regular season.
And there's no guarantees. Yeah, there's no guarantees. Yeah, so if you could guarantee that, sure. In our fun hypothetical January 17th.
Or, I mean, it is a fun conversation. Maybe if BYU beats Gonzaga in a West Coast Conference tournament to win the WCC tournament championship, would that be better than an NCAA tournament win?
Yes, because you haven't done it in 21 years. Yeah, 100%. Come on.
Okay, so maybe there are 4 opportunities for BYU to best this win. But the point is there aren't many.
I hope that's not the best win.
Me too. There aren't many.
If that's the best win... It's a good win. It's a very good to great win, right? It's hard for me to say at San Francisco. It's this like unbelievable win. Like when the dust settles on the season. I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking when the season's over and that was the best win. I want more.
Yeah, pretty wild.
It's San Francisco.
And it almost got BYU into the top 25.
Rice-A-Roni.
And the Cougars' metrics are great. We'll get to that later in the show. Our question of the day is the win over San Francisco the best win BYU will have all season? Let's go to Voice of the Nation.
This is the Voice of the Nation on BYU Sports Nation.
All right, first response in from @ShayLawrence on Twitter. Yes, best win so far, especially given the way BYU came back in the gauntlet over the past week. Best win until Oregon wins the Pac-12 or BYU beats Gonzaga at home again. #BYUSN.
Yeah, we'll see, man. San Francisco's better than even they thought, I think, this season, and that's why it's good. Also, should you be credited with going down in a game? Like, isn't it your fault you went down in the game, too? You know what I mean?
But sure. I mean, there is this almost unspoken quality to hey, you showed extra grit on the road if you trailed. And
well, what about the games where you just blow someone out? It's like you never even let it get to that point.
Gonzaga.
We don't credit that in the same way. We're like, you know what didn't happen? You didn't go down
because
10.
it's not as much of an emotional roller coaster. Right?
No, I feel you.
People value like the emotional roller coaster when it ends in victory.
So go suck and then come back and be like, oh, the effort of this team. It's like, well, why did you go down at all?
Yeah. I mean, we look at the game against Iona and the 2012 NCAA tournament like that, right?
They came back
down 25.
I'm not discrediting the comeback. I'm just saying, wait, why'd you go down by so much? What happened? Coming up, did we give Jay Billis some blue goggles?
Maybe so. Plus, point guard Tijon Lucas of BYU Basketball joins us live. Has his decision to transfer to BYU already been validated? This is BYU Sports Nation.
I know what it's like to be overlooked, to be doubted, to fly under the radar. I only had one offer coming out of high school, but I was ready for every moment, every opportunity, and every shot that I got. Now I'm playing professional basketball, aiming to be one of the best shooters on the planet. And I'm just getting started. Be ready for your moment with Rapid Reboot, the future of rapid recovery.
Professor Rock here.
The Food Nanny.
Chandler Scott here.
Samry.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
I just want to tell you about this amazing,
Excellent.
Cool account called My Style.
My Style checking. I'm talking travel points.
Gift card. Concert tickets.
All just for using my account.
That's My Style.
So check it out.
Give it a shot.
Open your My Style checking account today.
Maybe it's not a good idea anymore that the guys be split up by race.
Gail Sayers.
That's right.
I'm Brian Piccolo.
We're not here to make friends.
The doctor said you should.
Will you leave me alone?
I was ready to give up. But I appreciate everything you did for me.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
Join us tomorrow for BYU Basketball with Mark Pope as the coach and Greg review the two-game road trip and preview this week's games against San Diego and Portland tomorrow night, 8:30 Eastern on the BYU TV app. Oh, by the way, Fousseyni Traore's Deep Blue airs tomorrow night. It's really good.
Can't wait. Bart Scott, can't wait. We are live in Studio B with your Monday version on a holiday of your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I'm Spencer Linton alongside Jarom Jordan. Our question of the day is the win over San Francisco by BYU men's basketball. The best that BYU will have all season. At Sean Larson 03 on Twitter says, I certainly hope not. If it is, it means BYU won't win an NCAA tournament game.
Why not?
And will lose both the road game at St. Mary's and the home game against Gonzaga and not beat either in the conference tournament.
Would a tourney semifinal win over San Francisco or St. Mary's trump that?
Ooh, I don't know, because road win.
Well, I would think so because it gets you to the WCC title game. Yeah, trumps it.
Maybe that helps.
Yeah,
in the metrics.
Well, it would be a quad one win as well, and it would get you to the title game. Getting to the title game, you're at least in that game, which probably at that point that extra win, we hope ensures like okay, BYU's definitely in. Like.
What if it's Santa Clara in the semifinals?
And St. Mary's or San Francisco didn't make it?
Yeah.
If they're the 5, are they on that side of the bracket? I can't even remember.
It's all strange.
Which, by the way, in 2 years we're going to be laughing at this. We're going to be like in the Big 12 days. We're going to be like, wait, we were talking about San Francisco being a huge game.
That's just a good team.
They are this year.
Good team.
I'm just talking like generally. Because you know what BYU's going to talk about in 2 years? No. The win over West Virginia and Iowa State and hopefully, Oklahoma. That's what we're talking about.
Granted, this team this year has some pretty good quad 2 wins, including the likes of Oregon and San Diego
I'm not
State,
talking about this team this year.
Better.
I'm talking about San Francisco basketball. Bill Cartwright ain't out there playing. Bill Russell ain't out there playing.
Joining us now, man who thankfully made the decision to transfer to BYU.
Thank goodness.
So glad he did. Tijon Lucas in studio. Tijon, welcome back to the show. Thanks for hanging out with us after a wild weekend, man.
For sure. Thank you guys for having me out here.
How are your emotions after that up and down game that ultimately finished on a supreme high at San Francisco?
It was just like the whole weekend. It was a roller coaster ride up and down. A lot of highs, a lot of lows, but, ultimately, we were able to get a win at the end of that game, which we were down most of the game. And so I was just, excited to come away with a weekend split. Anytime you have 2 road games, especially against those quality opponents, getting a split is something that's very good.
Were you guys aware of the Mark Pope regular season never lost back-to-back stat?
Yeah.
Was that top of mind?
We've heard it ever since we've lost. Every time we lost. Any loss, we're like, hey, we never lost back-to-back games. But, at the end of the day, I think we got a lot of guys with character and, a lot of heart. And, we don't really look into, having losing back-to-back games. We just try to focus in the moment. And I think, us going into that game, we were pretty confident in the preparation we had. It was a lot of mental prep because we didn't want to, use our legs a lot the travel day. But, ultimately, we had success in getting a win.
Okay, so Thursday night, take me back to that, because you guys this is one of the best defensive teams BYU's ever had. Gonzaga just goes crazy. How do you mentally and physically rebound, that way to be ready for a huge game on Saturday night? Because that easily could have got away from you if you let Thursday linger.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We just had to get back to what we do best. Even though we got out-rebounded a little bit, which is one of our main principles every night, in and out, we were able to focus in on our scouting report keys, try to take away threes. We know St. Francisco shoots a lot of threes, and I don't think they made that many that night. I think they made only 2. And, that was something we wanted to take away, and I think we did a good job in doing that. And then, we knew they were going to fight hard, and they're a good veteran team. So, we just had to take away their strengths and try to, win and live off of what they do, least likely.
Yeah, BYU's three-point defense and that Ken Pomeroy index, one of the best in the country, for sure.
3 for 23, 13%.
Woo!
That'll do.
Tijon Lukin is with us on BYU Sports Nation. What do you think about the West Coast Conference thus far? Because this is your first go-around with the WCC. You've already played St. Mary's, at Gonzaga, and at San Francisco, in that order, by the way. So what do you think of the West Coast Conference?
I think it's a very good league. They keep reiterating that it's one of the best leagues out there right now, for NCAA tournament bids this year, hopefully. And, those teams are great. We played St. Mary's at home, Gonzaga away, San Francisco away. And those teams, give them credit. They've been doing a great job. They took care of their non-conference slate. And, we were able to, have some fight in us and come away with 2 out of the 3 wins against, 3 of the top teams in our conference. So, WCC is a great league, and I think, we're poised to be a pretty good, defending champ or whatever you want to get us to, and 1, 2, 3 spot, and I think we can do well in it.
Let's go. Okay, let's talk about the free throw situation. I'm not going to have you comment on the officiating because I don't want to get in trouble. But I'll say it because I can get in plenty of trouble. So at 12:41 in the second half, that's the first free throws for the team. Technical foul happened. Someone said something on the bench or whatever. I don't know what happened. But whatever happened, it was good. Because after that, you guys shoot 18, they shoot 9. You get you to the line, 6-6, AB to the line, 3 of 4. What role did free throw shooting play in winning that game?
I think, it played a big part in it. Free throws can win and lose you the game. If we miss some of those down the stretch, I miss some of those down the stretch, who knows the trajectory of that game. But, I think overall we just started to match their physicality. And so they had to start making calls our way because we just, kind of forced them to make those calls.
On offense?
Yeah, on offense. So it's like we had to make those guys make calls. And, we knew what the free throw numbers were, going into halftime. We didn't shoot any, but, once, great shooters and great players get to the free throw line, the basket opens up a lot too. So, we just kept emphasizing, play with force, keep attacking and,
there that is, the force.
Use the force.
Yes, the force. And, it eventually, play out. And, gladly at the end of the game, we started to get to the line and, credit guys like, Tiki Ali Tiki went in and hit 2 for 2 in the second half. And then, Seneca hit some and Alex and me. And so, Fousseyni stepped up there and hit some big ones. So, I think we have a pretty good free throw shooting team. And so, one of our goals is, to get up there, be efficient, and have confidence up there.
Alex wanted to make it interesting at the very end.
Yes, definitely.
A little drama.
Yeah, sure. Sprinkle some drama in.
Oh,
make
yeah,
the
yeah.
game
Go for
better,
a 3.
more
Yeah. Just
exciting.
miss a 3. Yeah.
Okay, Tijon, you quote tweeted John Rothstein of CBS Sports, who said, "Hey, buy stock in Fousseyni Traore right now." What do you think about Foussey's rise by necessity because Richard Harward and Gavin Baxter right now? How is he doing this?
It's unbelievable what Fousseyni is doing out there. He's just a freshman. He's learning as he's playing. And honestly, since I've been in college, he's probably the best or one of the best freshmen I've ever played with, just because of his upside and how he's been playing and controlling himself. And he's taking on a lot. Playing the 5-man, you're kind of our leader on defense, talking a lot. And, even on offense, he's been doing a lot of great things. He's shooting, I don't know what percentage he is from the field, but he's shooting great. He's averaging nearly almost a double-double the last, 5-6 games. And, you just can't, respect and appreciate Foose because he's just been killing it out there, back-to-back freshman of the weeks. So, I'm just super proud of him, happy we can have him on the team. And, his upside is huge. And when he said buy stock now, I was like, I'd take all my savings and buy stock.
You bought it long ago, right?
Yeah, buy the
exactly.
Foose crypto right now.
Exactly.
52% is the number, by the way.
Oh yeah.
And it's just dunking on fools in this one. There was some teeth grinding dunks in that.
When he dunked against San Francisco and just hung on the rim with one arm, I'm on the bench like, wow, this kid's nice. Because I don't think anybody thought he was just going to dunk that when he caught it because he just reversed. And people forget, Foose is 6'6", 6'7", with a 7'3" wingspan.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever have him reach anything you can't grab? You're like, hey, Foose, come over here. Just
I should, though. But his arms are super long, and, he's just very skilled and poised. He's so calm as a freshman. A lot of guys get sped up, and Foose is just out there playing like he's a veteran already.
Seriously, his growth has been tremendous. Kind of Yoli Child's freshman year esque. Shabazz and Boye have given BYU fits over the last couple years. Like you and Alex, they're seniors who came back with COVID. What was that matchup like? Because that was fun to watch the four of you kind of go at it there.
Oh, it was a great matchup. Those guys, play hard. They were getting into us physically a lot early on. They jumped the passing lanes. They tried to deny us a lot, and what we did on the defensive end, I think for the most part we did a pretty good job on them guys. We like to say, if you take more shots than you made points, then I think you did a pretty good job. And that's what I think, we did with those guys. And, they settled for some threes and some contested twos, but we live with contested twos. So, honestly, I think, all our guys did a good job. Spencer got a little piece of them. Gideon got some of them, and overall, I think we stuck to the scout report, run them off the three-point line, and make those guys shoot long twos. And overall, I think it went well.
You're rocking one of your Find Your Purpose hats. How did that come to be? What went into kind of the generation of all of that?
And I was wearing mine all weekend, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
It's a nice hat.
Yes,
I love it.
Yes. So I signed a NIL deal, Steel Hats, and they're based out of Utah. And, they kind of, hit me up talking, and I like what they stood for at the end of the day. A lot of times you get a lot of deals and a lot of people ask you to do things, but, I wanted to see what their purpose was and what they have their meaning for. And, I did my research. They have a hat with Tanner Mangum, who was the former QB here, with a mental health kind of thing and his story on their website. And I thought that was brilliant. And so they wanted to kind of tell my story through apparel and hats. And I think, something I stand for was find your purpose. And I think, I found my purpose through basketball. And so, if you look at the hat, it has like a basketball, kind of design on it with the find your purpose. And, we told my story about, how I came up growing through Milwaukee and all the trials and tribulations and breaking my ankle and going to the NBA Top 100 camp, finally getting big-time offers and being a late bloomer and, just sticking with it. And so I think that the Find Your Purpose idea was, something we found mutually that could represent me and what the company is about. And, it's something that I pride myself on and something I think people in the whole world can take and say, hey, what's my purpose in my life? What's my purpose in doing this and that? And so I think it was a great collaboration and just, blessed to be able to do it.
We love the hats that you gave
us.
Awesome,
man.
We're so glad you found your purpose at BYU and what you're doing for this BYU basketball program and setting a great example. Tijan, thanks for hanging out with us. We know you got to get to practice. and
early practice today. Holiday early practice. Right?
I'll take it.
Yeah, 11 a.m.
Okay.
Hey, let's give you some karma so you can have some energy for practice.
Yes.
Go get it done this week. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, guys.
Tijan Lucas with us on BYU Sports Nation, BYU basketball transfer point guard.
Coming up, team sheets, Ken Palm, and so on. What's projected for BYU the rest of the regular season?
And is Alex Barcelo the best shooter in the country? Because one big-time national analyst definitely thinks so. This is BYU Sports Nation.
Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork sells Ford vehicles including the F-150. the pickup designed for work and play. Tim Daly Ford maintains a large inventory, providing more choices for selecting an F-150 with the power and engineering to carry and tow heavy loads. The F-150's design offers comfort, safety, and a range of options to choose from. Think Ford. Think Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork.
They prefer to be bringing the heat, getting set for success, demonstrating their drive. But when their blood and sweat turns to tears or anything else, we lay the groundwork for BYU's athletes to hit the ground running again, and you as well. Intermountain Healthcare, official medical provider for BYU Athletics.
Familiar with the BYU TV app?
Yes.
I beg your pardon?
Sure, it's got great original TV shows. But it also gives you access to family films for free.
Wow. Awesome!
So gather around, grab some popcorn, and let us do the rest.
It'll be fun.
Watch some of your favorite films anytime, anywhere. With the free BYU TV app.
I like it.
BYU Sports Nation is brought to you by Maersk, enabling global trade for a growing world.
BYU hosts San Diego Thursday at the Marriott Center. Watch the Cougars look to move to 4-1 in WCC play. Both teams 3-1, tied for second place in the league. Coverage begins at 8:30 Eastern on BYU TV with countdown to tip-off. Then the game on BYU TV at 9 Eastern time in the app. Now remember, your DVR may not have this because this was a late ad as of yesterday. So you may have to manually go add that if you're not watching it live.
Manually added already.
Do it.
He is Jarom. I'm Spencer. This is BYU Sports Nation. To interact with the show at any point and get content throughout the day, follow us on the major social media platforms of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. It's time to whip it. Cougar Whip Around presented by Maersk, your integrated container logistics company enabling global trade for a growing world.
Jay Billis, who was on the program last week, says Alex Barcelo on College Game Day Saturday is the best shooter in the country. Is that a blue goggle take or the reality?
I'm buying this from Jay Billis. Because of how teams defend Alex Barcelo, he often has multiple players, their best defenders constantly thrown at him. He is constantly harassed, and he still makes shots at a high level, Jarom. So while his percentage might not be the highest in the country, it's what he's having to deal with to still shoot an insane percentage that I think Jay Billis values, and certainly I value. I'm buying this. Like, the dude is a shot maker and has to do so knowing that he's the guy with a target on his back every stinking game.
If he's not the best shooter in the country, he's 1F.
It's
yeah,
close, right?
He's amazing. He's amazing. He's a 182.6 right now in the free throw, field goal, 3-point.
You're from 180 plus. That's unbelievable.
47.6. He's so good. Yes, he's fantastic. Like, he's the best 3-point shooter by percentage in BYU history. He's so fun to watch. BYU's lucky it has Alex Barcelo because guess what? I think BYU's record is better than the team is a little bit. And that's because the team is figuring out how, despite not having the personnel that it had at the beginning of the season. And that is to BYU's credit for figuring it out.
We've been talking about, hey, look, they defend and they rebound. Let's go ahead and add, and they have one of the best, if not the best shooter in the country, Alex Barcelo, as a third metric to why BYU's winning games.
Before the season, we were talking about Alex in NBA and top whatever in college, and I said, yeah, I think he's top 50. And someone reached out to me with the program and said, whoa, no, he's like top 15, top 20. He's that good, and it's hard to argue against that.
Jay Billis is buying that stock for sure. Speaking of stocks, John Rothstein tweeted out the following during the BYU at San Francisco game on Saturday night. Fousseyni Traore, buy stock now. Jarom, how much of your BYU Hoops futures, stock terminology, are invested in Foos?
Pretty high. There's a lot. There's some in Colin Chandler as well, right? Yeah, Foose is playing at such a high level so quickly as a freshman, right? We're going to expect a lot from him, starting next year.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder about next year when you lose Tejon Lucas and Alex Barcelo, but having Foose helps. Dallin Hall coming back from a mission at some point. Colin Chandler.
Get real young on the guard line. Yep.
Woo! Yep. Yeah, but for sure. We're talking about just BYU's future. My stock is probably 90% on Foose right now.
A lot.
He's the guaranteed guy right now.
And Matt Damon told me to be aggressive, so take a risk.
All right.
Chris Vanini of The Athletic reports Ed Lamb is a candidate at Hawaii. Will Lamb be the next head coach there?
I love Ed Lamb, and I think that he needs to be a head coach. Hawaii would be lucky to have Ed Lamb as the head coach. I don't know at this point, but I mean, the way that program is going, it's an absolute mess right now. I can't think of a better person than an Ed Lamb, principled, sound, the cyborg, going in there and helping Hawaii find some continuity and bring that program to more of an even keel. So, yeah, I'd lean towards yes. Like, if he was number 2 the last time around, he lost out. He was the second in line to take
One
that
report
job.
said he was second, yeah.
Then why wouldn't he be the next head coach at Hawaii? As much as I hate to lose Ed Lamb because I love Ed, I think he is the obvious choice for Hawaii at this point, given the state of that program.
Depends what they want, what they need, right? A cyborg on the islands, Ed can chill and have fun. But I don't know if he'll be the next head coach. We'll see. But I do think it is a positive thing when your assistants move on to other pastures that give glory back to BYU or whatever. There's value in that. So I would love to see that at some point.
Yeah, if he is the guy, question is, does he talk any of the other BYU assistants into following him to Hawaii?
There is that sort of natural mutiny that can happen.
Yeah, okay. All right, Jarom, back to basketball now. The BYU women, 40-point winners on the road at LMU. In spite of shooting, Jeff Judkin's words, a poor percentage from the three-point line again. Will this BYU women's team run the table in the West Coast Conference in the regular season?
They might. The defense is awesome. The offense is incredible. There's almost no weakness to this team. The one game they've lost was 99-91 at Oklahoma, who's also ranked.
Yep.
And is 15-2 in the Big 12.
Oklahoma just beat ranked Baylor this last weekend, too.
What? This team's so good. It's Sweet 16 good. Again, watch this team play in person or on TV. They're really good. They might. If they don't, they'll only lose one game in league.
Here's the other thing to keep in mind. If BYU was a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, they will host the first and second rounds at the Marriott Center.
Oh, that's new this year? They're not going to neutral sites?
They will host on their home floor rounds 1 and 2 if they're a top 4 seed.
That's exciting.
Right? It'd be amazing.
Top 4 then. Only lose the one game in OT.
The only game that really gives me concern is at Gonzaga. Maybe at San Diego, because sometimes weird games happen in the Slim Gym, both the men and the women.
Right.
And Cindy Fisher does a good job, and they play defense too. They can make the game ugly.
Sometimes that's all they do, though. They don't play much offense. Question, am I off on that? Has it always been
I believe
top 4 seeds host?
The top 4 seeds host the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I didn't understand.
That is an advantage. So
cool.
How awesome would that be to have 2 games at the Marriott Center?
Amazing.
All right,
love it. Which was faster, your 40-yard dash or the official spotting the ball in the final play of the Cowboys-Niners game?
I'm going to give myself the edge here. Much to the chagrin of the Dallas Cowboys. One, I don't know why they called that play.
No. The play's fine. Dak just has to get down earlier. It's the same as throwing an inbounds 10-yard pass.
I'd rather throw it to the end zone twice in 14 seconds from the 40-yard line.
It's a chuck. It's 30-plus, right? Dak went too far. If he gets down 3 seconds earlier, they're good.
Right, but now you're depending on the official and other things to happen. You just take it out of your control.
Right. If you get down 3 seconds earlier, you give yourselves those 3 seconds that you didn't have.
Assuming the official can get the ball spotted in time.
No, he would have. 3 seconds would have made the difference. Dak ran 5 yards too far.
Oh, boy. That's rough. Yeah. Granted, the 49ers, was that a false start? Should the Cowboys even have had that opportunity?
Right, it got weird. By the way, I was hanging out in St. George over the weekend. There was a park, Canyon View Park or something. They actually had a 40-yard dash, 2 lanes, and a timer set up. So everyone was running it. The friends we were with, my friend Justin, he He pulled a hammy. It was like a classic tale.
He ran it and hurt himself?
Oh, we all ran it.
What'd you run?
No, it doesn't start exact. It goes red, yellow, and then green, and it's down there. You're like, oh, do I go now? No, it was way off. No.
You're not going to reveal?
Why would I reveal the crappy time that it didn't give?
Yes. Perhaps that's well played on your part because you can now, by not revealing, you can.
I never claimed to run anything. Okay. I never claimed to run faster than Harvey Unga.
Oh, was my time faster than yours?
I don't have to reveal anything. Wait, the time wasn't set up properly.
Former Cleveland Brown Joe Thomas tweeted out, "Hey Steelers, congrats on your playoff participation trophy."
This is great.
Then former BYU Cougar and Steeler Brett Kiesel responded to Thomas with a, "Did you ever get one of those?" No. Tweet, "Is that the best hit of the NFL playoffs so far?"
Yes.
Well, it's verbal, but still.
There are no good hits anymore. Yeah.
It was fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, hits are terrible late roughing the passer goal.
When you've played for the Cleveland Browns, Joe Thomas was awesome, all pro.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about playoffs and anything and trying to throw shade at the Steelers of all
Joe
teams,
Thomas.
the Steelers who've won 6 Super Bowls.
Well, 2 in the modern era at least. You know what I mean? Save the 70s.
No, this is absolutely the response that should have been offered by a former Steeler and Brett Kiesel. I'm so glad he did it.
Yeah, divisional rivalry there. Yeah, exactly. Coming up, a unique prediction pays off in double.
And what's on the horizon for BYU basketball? Take a look at their metrics and what's upcoming in the next few weeks. This is BYU Sports Nation.
The time is 1500 hours.
Again with a pair of aces? I don't know how you keep beating me.
Hi, Spencer Linton here, letting you know when your company joins the BYU team as a corporate partner, your brand can be featured in sports programming on BYU TV and BYU Radio. In addition to all of the great games, you can be part of the BYU coaches shows, place your message in Countdown to Kickoff, basketball pre- and post-game shows, and each weekday on BYU Sports Nation. We invite your team to join ours and become a corporate sponsor of BYU Athletics. For details, email sponsorship@byu.edu today.
Trio Orem Senior Living believes in empowering seniors to live life to the fullest. We help eliminate stress out of daily life when you live at Trio. Less time focusing on housework means you can socialize at one of our many events, with safety in mind, of course. And did we mention our spacious apartments with modern amenities? Learn more about setting up a private tour at trioorem.com.
Who would like to give me a definition of what music is? Any music. What do you think? What kind of music do you like to listen to? Rock and roll?
It has come to my attention that you are teaching the students rock and roll.
I will use anything from Beethoven to Billie Holiday to rock and roll if I think it'll help me teach a student to love music.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
On the newest Deep Blue podcast, we talked with Olympic gymnast and silver medalist Guard Young about his family legacy at BYU. His dad coached the men's team, helping with the end of the men's program, his time at Oklahoma, and leading the women's team. Listen to it on the BYU radio app and where podcasts are found.
What has that guy even done?
I know. Mailing it in constantly. JK, he's like one of the hardest working dudes ever.
He's incredible. Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation live from Studio B. It is time to get to our BYU basketball resume update, which has BYU in the net rankings at number 26.
Pretty good.
Which is almost exactly where BYU is in the top 25 rankings, 2 spots out.
Who cares about that?
BYU in the Ken Palm metrics, 21. That's up 6 spots from 27.
Good offense, good defense, except for Thursday night.
Bracket Matrix now has BYU at that 8 seed That doesn't change much, but look at team rankings.
Yep.
With the win at San Francisco, BYU's chances of making the NCAA tournament go up 17 percentage points.
Wild. Okay, so Ken Palm says projected 23-7 record. You're like, hey, there's a game missing. Yeah, it's the Portland game. Which, by the way, why isn't that rescheduled? I don't understand.
Maybe BYU doesn't want to reschedule that game.
Don't reschedule it. This does you nothing. Okay, 11-4 projection in the league, which means 8-3 is projected down the stretch in the final 11. Three losses. Let's come up with what they are. Obviously at Gonzaga, at St. Mary's. And then Ken Palm just goes by percentage. It actually has, only 2 losses listed, but Santa Clara is the least likely other game there for BYU to win. A 3-point game, 62%. So probably Santa Clara. Now, do we expect BYU to drop 3 games the rest of the way?
Just because of what BYU has pulled off recently?
Feels like no.
Yes.
So is 2 a fair number? Like BYU, it's expected to lose to Gonzaga and one other one, whether that we're not saying which one that is, just another one.
Yeah.
That'd probably be at St. Mary's, at Santa Clara. One of those 2, right?
Even if BYU lost 3 more games, they're still firmly in the NCAA tournament.
23-7, you're in. And you're single-digit seed at that point.
Because the conference is better. So, if you have a road loss against Santa Clara or St. Mary's, the committee's going to be like, yeah, whatever.
And you tested yourself in non-con. Just because BYU doesn't have a quad 1 win doesn't mean it's BYU 6-3 in quad 2. By the way, UVU still quad 2.
Maybe Oregon becomes a quad 1 win, Jarom.
It might.
Oregon is just outside the top 50 now.
Let me tell you the other win that's getting way better than we thought.
San Diego
State. 45 in net today. It's good. It's made with real bits of Panthers, so you know it's good.
Is Oregon, I think, are they 53 in the net rankings today?
60.
Oh, they're 60, so they dropped a little bit.
Yes.
Okay.
Why'd they drop if they played UCLA and USC? That's weird. Okay, that is firmly a quad 2. Great. That's awesome. And you could argue that's, San Francisco's the best win, but second best win feels like Oregon, right? Given what Oregon did last week. In terms of prestige, non-metrical prestige is the Oregon
This
win.
is what Oregon does so often. They just kind of bumble through the non-conference, and then they get better as they go through conference and win big games.
That's the state in general as well. Okay, yes, 1-1 in quad 1, 6-3 in quad 2, and then 6-0 in quad 3 and 4. What you hope is that UVU stays 135, top 135.
They're 120.
And that's not a quad
right?
3. They're 107.
Oh, okay.
So the hope is they don't slide down to quad 3. I think they're good enough to stay in the top 135, which is great. Yeah, BYU's looking good. It is curious because if it's 100% metrics based, that BYU has one quad 1 win at this point and is firmly in the tourney and an 8 seed. So it's not about quad 1 games per se. It's like quad 1 and 2. That's something we're learning a little bit this year. The perception from Lenardi. Now we're going heavy on Lenardi, but Lenardi's the number 1 guy for a reason. Okay, he's the number 1 guy. And I want to go back to what I was saying about BYU's better than its record.
Its record is better than the team, you think?
I think that BYU has won probably 2 games because it has 2 sixth-year seniors, and it has a team that buys into the concept, best locker room in America, and the defense has been awesome. It's been incredible. And some of those elements, like the intangibles, if you will, have created this where BYU probably should be a 13-6 team. But they're a 15-14.
But don't you feel like they've lost a couple of games that they should have won? Utah Valley, Vanderbilt.
You lose some games. Like it's okay. BYU's 15-4. Football did this same thing where they did a couple of things that, if they played 100 games of this schedule, that we're seeing the higher end of the potential of that team. Some of that has to do with coaching. And again, some of that has to do with sixth-year seniors are refusing to let certain things happen in certain games. You're going to lose some games. You can't say to me, yes, you have to win these games, but you never accidentally lose any. The regression to the mean is interesting to me on this. It's well, you can't say, yes, you win that St. Mary's game every time, but you never lose to Vanderbilt or whatever. Sometimes you lose a close game. It happens.
Yeah, I just feel like you say 2, maybe 1. Because I think that BYU, the Utah Valley game and the Vanderbilt game, those were games that BYU was favored to win, projected to win, should have won, I think. And
let's talk wins on the same spectrum, though. Like San Diego State, BYU makes some great plays, plays some great defense, and wins that game. You know what I mean?
But should BYU have lost that game? Like they were favored to win that game.
If they play 100 times, they lose that game sometimes. You know what I mean?
Sure, they lose it sometimes, but not the majority.
But that's what I'm saying
and they were favored.
No, I feel like you're missing the point. That we can't say, well, BYU should have won a couple they lost. Well, then they should have lost some they won too. Like that exists.
To my point, that's what I'm saying. Like it's evened out. They lost 2 that they should have won, and they won 2 that they should have lost. This is your point with football. It's like, well, look, losses are going to happen. The losses happened against Vanderbilt and
I think
Utah Valley.
More probably could have easily happened, but this team's figured out ways to win. Yeah, I don't think that it's always necessarily even. It's like, hey, it's 2-2. No. I'm telling you, I think this team has figured out a way to be better than it is. Meaning, you lost Gavin Baxter and Richard Harvard. You shouldn't be 15-4.
But they are.
You shouldn't be. But BYU is because they figured it out with, again, 6th-year guards, 2 of them. Incredible. What's BYU going to do next year? That's a big question mark. But let's enjoy this year. And then the defense has been awesome. It's been great. The role players, Foose is like, if Foose isn't amazing right now, he's not 15-4. Like, he's been way better than we thought. And he's been, as you said, forced into learning. And he's learned quickly.
He's better now because of the necessity.
He is, yes. And what you don't anticipate preseason is who's going to do something we don't see because they have to. Like, we didn't think Keanu Hill would be as good as he was this year. You know what I mean? We thought Puka would be awesome, but, like, it took a sec for him to get healthy. And then he was, like, really, really good. Jaron Hall was better than we all thought. Like, that's the fun part of this. It's not a bunch of 0s and 1s. We're not, like, in the Matrix taking the red or the blue pill, and then we just play this, like, predestined season out on paper. No. It's fun, and it's terrible at the same time, and right now it's more fun.
BYU heavily favored in 2 games this week, both at home, San Diego and Portland.
It's 94 and 97%.
Cougars
wins.
take care of business, and a few teams lose, and just maybe BYU's back in the top 25.
How about that? And top 25 doesn't matter in the basketball conversation. It's just like a fun thing. It's all about
exposure.
Net. It's all about net. Yeah, let's go. Coming up, rising shout out to MLK, of course.
And why earning a point in this week's Double Down over the weekend really kind of just does nothing for me. This is BYU Sports Nation.
If I got hurt and was laid up at home, I wouldn't even think to call a lawyer. What a hassle. I'd want to meet them first.
What if I told you that for your first consultation, your lawyer will come to you, home or hospital?
Really?
Really.
They do that?
If you've been seriously injured, we'll come to you. It's your job to get better. It's our job to deal with the insurance companies and protect your legal rights.
Learn more at siegfriedandjensen.com.
When we sit down to watch TV, it's a fun way to unite your family, be entertained, and to watch what's on BYU TV.
Brings our family together. We all love BYU TV.
If you are watching it with your family, you will have a good time and you can reconnect and you can bond with your family and have a better relationship with them.
All of us together. Maybe it's not a good idea anymore that the guys be split up by race.
Gail Sayers.
That's right.
I'm Brian Piccolo.
We're not here to make friends.
The doctor said you should...
Will you leave me alone?
I was ready to give up. But I appreciate everything you did for me.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Mountain America, the official credit union of BYU Athletics.
BYU Sports Nation, always available on demand via the BYU TV and BYU radio apps.
Download the pod. You can Google it, subscribe, rate, and review.
Let's recap our double down picks from BYU at San Francisco. Jarom, you're in the lead. Lead us off.
Here's Dave's picks. 1, Foose will record a double-double. He didn't. He had a 99. He was cool. 2, Trevor Nell will score a career high of 21+. He did not. He had 7. So, Dave, I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right, my picks. Caleb Lohner scores in double figures again.
We're just going to hang on a shot of me after this.
1 bucket short. Lohner did come up with some big plays late, so I still think he's turned the corner, Jarom. At Gonzaga at San Francisco.
100%.
He's playing with confidence. He has turned the corner, but he just missed double figures. He had 8 points. Number 2, BYU will hold USF to 75 or fewer points. They averaged 78. I got that lone point here as the Cougars held the Dons to 69 points. I was afraid it was going to go into overtime, and I was going to miss that one, too.
You were going to miss it? Yeah, nice. Okay, number 1, BYU wins by 5+. Nope, 2-point game. 2-point game. 2, Spencer will get 1 right pick. I got that. This was new turf.
I'm not even mad.
I'm not even mad. I'm actually impressed.
It's a troll.
I hit a whole wheel of cheese.
Not even mad.
Yeah. So there we go.
Updated standings now. Jarom 29 points. I have 15 points. Dave and Jason still on that 5 spot.
Yeah, they're on the schneid.
Our question of the day is: the win over San Francisco the best win that BYU men's basketball will have all season? I think there are a few opportunities to supplant it, but man, that was a good win. Our elite voice of the day presented by Sundance Mountain Resort at Cougar A70 on Twitter. No, it's up there, but the Sweet 16 win will be the best. Polishing up my blue goggles already. Go Cougs. Hey, the round of 64 win will be better than the San Francisco win for sure.
Wait, you didn't want to read the next one? What's this handle? At Jarom Roney?
Yep.
Jerome, maybe?
Jarom
Roney? From a net rankings and resume standpoint, yes. From a sheer awesomeness and hype perspective, humiliating Oregon still has the edge.
32-point win.
Oh, yeah. Oregon. Nationally, no one's like, dude. Or the Oregon win, blew up the internet. It was awesome.
Today's Rise and Shout Out presented by Mountain America, the official credit union of BYU Athletics. And how about this quote from the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. One of his incredible messages.
Martin Luther King Martin Luther King III spoke at a devotional in September here.
Great.
It was amazing. Also, Rise shout out to Tonga. Volcano goes off near the island, and then a tsunami. And just thinking about everyone in Tonga, I know it's really scary and rough there right now. Obviously, Klein Stake is the first Tongan head coach. Hema Heimuli on our staff is Tongan. A lot of Tongan family still back there. Hopefully everything's all right.
Yeah, we're glad to hear via social media that things are getting a little bit better. Electricity is being turned back on. Communication is being restored to a degree. Our thanks to today's guest, Tijan Lucas.
Sorry, Dennis.
For Jarom, I'm Spencer. Because it's been a while, shout out to Ron Solis.
Oh, nice.
See you tomorrow on BYU Sports Nation. Go Cougs.
Ron Solis in the post.